Good morning. Welcome to the Town Council's Financial Oversight Committee meeting of Friday, July the 17th at 10 a.m. We're located at the media room at the Senior Center. And having opened the meeting, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 10th meeting minutes. I hope everybody's had a chance to read them.
I just had two minor, and I didn't, sorry Kathy, I didn't have time to.
That's okay.
Email, and it's just in the fifth paragraph down, and they're very minor, just scribners. The paragraph that starts with discuss.
Should be discussion.
Discussion.
Caught that for me.
Okay, and then the second line, taking up the responsibility.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Nope, not a problem. I got that already, but Diane's got some that are, I think, valid.
In the paragraph two above, the changes that, when Chris made her statement, she didn't reference any particular committees or names, and it was also June 29th meeting that she.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. I did not mention anyone by name.
Yeah, so I can make those changes.
It was just made by the school committee, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, with amendments, is everybody in accord with the minutes? I'd like to hear a motion.
With those changes, I move to approve.
And I'll second it.
Having a second, is there any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's taken care of. I think Jim is going to walk us through the new packet that we received this morning. He's been working, I think, all week on this with some of the changes because our new finance director found some errors and corrections needed to be made and some revisions needed to be made.
Yeah, and in most instances, they were good errors, meaning the error went to our favor. So
Yes.
appreciate that. And also, some of my work was just trying to keep up with the changes so that our numbers stayed in sync with the town manager's budget.
Yeah. So you feel this presentation here is pretty much in sync?
Yes.
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 Mary's nodding her head, yes, okay.
Basically, the cover page and the folks who've been working on the recommendations, the contents with just states what the exhibits are. The general fund sources is really where we went over how the real estate tax was calculated, and the estimates for state aid, local receipts, and transfers. So this just summarizes in more detail what the sources we came up with, which is that 65, 384, 758. And I should probably step back and say that in essence, our presentation, because we are making recommendations based on the town manager budget that was presented to the town council, you'll find that in all but one instance, our recommendations really, we recommend the town manager's recommended budget. So this number 65, 384, 758, it also is what the town manager is using. The next one really just does the quick sources and uses, and so we have the same number, 65,384,758 for the fiscal year 21, which is the same as the town managers. And then this exhibit just does in summary form the general categories of general fund uses, and including the departments and insurance and debt service, and then goes on to the other general fund uses, the capital projects, stabilization fund, etc. And the total uses of the general fund is 63,644,001. And you'll note that our committee's recommendation is $56,613 less than the town manager's budget recommendation for general fund uses, and that is in the education budget, where the town manager is using the budget that was submitted to the town, that was approved by the school committee, and we're using a number that it's lower based on our discussions and work. So for our purposes, we're showing a sources over uses of $1,740,756 versus $1,684,143. The remainder of the next page is really, again, goes over each of the department numbers and in categories in more detail. It's the same format that was used for the town manager's budget to be presented to the town council. The only difference is we show a column, as we had discussed at our last meeting, with our recommendation and any differences. And again, the only difference, which the total comes out on page 8, is again the 56,613 versus in terms of the difference, and again that's the school budget. The next 2 pages are the FY21 capital projects. And again, the 2 columns are the town manager recommended budget and the financial oversight committee recommendations. And you'll note that there really are no differences in the recommendations. We agree with what has been recommended for capital projects. The amount in the general fund that will be used from the general fund for in the operating budget is the $1,940,940.
Jim,
Which
I have a question on
yep.
this, and it's something that has come up. When the capital committee recommended the insertion of the feasibility study for the high school, what was the approach? Was the approach something that would have to go to the council for approval first? Or it was simply packaged into the capital projects?
Well, the capital projects have to be approved by the town council first anyhow.
Right.
So I mean, they're gonna need to approve these projects. So, and Tom and Mary were in the discussions. I think we included it in the recommendations because from our understanding, I think there was only 1 more year left to go before,
Right.
that we either had to do the feasibility study, or if we didn't, we would lose our place in the queue in terms of lining up for where we might be for the state capital building projects.
Right.
So it was either now or we're way back where we started. And of course, with the fairly substantial repairs that we've been deferring from the high school, it just seemed like this was something that you needed to do.
Yeah.
So we treated it as our recommendation was a bonding. As it says in the notes here, it's our understanding that this town should wind up being reimbursed on the debt service for this study by 55%, but you have to approve the whole thing in order to, be eligible. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question, Chris?
Yeah, it does. I just want to ask Steve or Mary, putting the debt service into the capital project, that you don't foresee any problem with that. I just want to make sure that this is in alignment for whatever the council may do.
There is no problem. You want to explain that?
Well, there's two different things. The town manager recommended budget that goes down the general fund of $1,940,940.
Right.
That basically is what will appear in the operating budget.
Yes.
If you go to the bottom of page 10, and you'll see total general fund projects recommended for FY21 is $2,597,370.
Right.
In my mind, that's the amount that the town council would need to approve for capital projects for fiscal year 21.
Okay.
So you'd have to approve those because you have to approve the $1,260,000 and the $449,000 in order to approve those projects.
Okay.
And then the column with the $1,000,009 is simply the impact on the operating budget
On the current budget.
for
Okay.
fiscal year 21.
All right, that's much clearer. Thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no,
but
no.
I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So those are the items, and then we moved over and just go through, and the second, there's two, you'll see the total amount of the feasibility study and the total amount of the steam pipe, listed separately here. And then we go on to the sewer enterprise fund, the water fund, the stormwater enterprise fund, and then the payment from the ambulance account, which each of those would be going against the separate enterprise funds,
Yeah.
and will impact the general fund or the tax rate. The only couple of changes is, again, in Steve and Mary working through the numbers, and Olga determined, and I assume with Bruce, determined that there were also some funds in a couple of the enterprise funds that were vehicle fund reserves. And so in one instance, one of the trucks was able, the $58,000 truck is going to be able to be funded from that vehicle fund reserve as opposed to being borrowed against.
Wonderful.
And you'll see it, let's see where we have it. It's actually the top of page 10, replacing truck number 81. And I put a little footnote there in parentheses 1, and in the notes it says to be paid from vehicle fund reserve. And then again in the water enterprise fund, there was also a vehicle fund reserve, not enough to pay for a single amount of these, but enough to pay a portion of the dump truck replacement, the $260,000. So the little caption, there's a footnote too, that'll be from a combination of bonding and vehicle fund reserve. So
Excellent.
they won't have to borrow the full $260.
Jim, through the chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want us to interrupt you as we have questions, or do you want to just go through the whole
Oh,
thing?
no, sure.
And then
It's
just
fine with
like-
me.
Well, my question is, when initially submitted, the capital projects were 115,000 and some change, and now it's down to 109. Is that because of this reflecting
No.
those
that's
costs?
Because Steve and Diane were going through the debt service calculations, and we determined that the $5,486, I think it was, for the steam pipe project that we were estimating in fiscal 21. The first payment of that will not be due until fiscal 22. So we were able to
Remove that.
remove that in its entirety.
Okay.
And what Jim was just explaining on the vehicle reserve, that's also something that Olga and Steve were able to suss out during between the time that I presented to you on Tuesday night and now. And it'll save us $10,000 on the $58,000 truck and $35,000 on the larger truck, in interest only, so $45K to the good. So
Wow.
that would be my recommendation that the council as a whole hasn't heard yet, and I'm glad that Jim footnoted it here.
Yeah.
There are a couple of slight variances in the draft that I gave to the council the other night, the one you just pointed out.
Right.
And these, so.
Right, and at the bottom of
Thank you,
page 9, I kind of changed our heading to read, projects recommended to be via bonding from enterprise funds and or paid from enterprise fund vehicle reserves, so that,
Yeah.
you know, the approval. The one thought I'm having though, as we've had this discussion, is whether we should move the placement of this $2,597,000 to right after the proposed, you know, the $1,709,000, so that you got the FY21, you know, impact. You got the projects that are not really reflected in the FY21 impact, and then should we then put the $2,597,000 as the total amount that needs to be approved for capital projects,
Yeah, I'm
rather than a
thinking back
footnote
to
on the
town
on the
meeting.
bottom.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to town meeting days where we would have a separate warrant for that. And
Right.
there can be a separate motion put before the council. Mary would be our
We
guide.
started them.
Ah.
There were 16 last year. I think this year there'll only be 13, but I was going to last year's motion combined the capital with the sewer, all the capital projects on one.
Oh,
And the general sources and uses was on a separate motion, so I can reconfigure them.
yeah.
It was part of, one of the things that I was sort of fooling around with the last couple days, trying to figure out, to the extent there were any differences in your committee's recommendation and what appeared on the draft. I don't want the council to have to do any adding or subtracting during the meeting,
Right.
but I don't know how to avoid that other than to prepare two motions, one with, you know, depending again on the school feasibility and several other issues that I think cannot be answered completely until Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Well,
if
but I
there-
can reconfigure the language of these motions to make them sort of correspond to how the report
Well, I'm
appears,
just thinking, at some point, the town council would have to approve capital projects totaling $2,597,000, whether that's a series of separate articles that
Yeah.
come to that. And I'm just not sure what the easiest way, I mean, one could add another column that said total projects and then FY21 debt service or impact, I don't know. It is a little confusing.
Well, I can also talk with Mike and see how many motions he wants or how few he wants. And we can maybe add, you know, put several issues on one to the point of, that Jim's making, put the capital on the same budget, or on the same motion rather, that the council could act on one motion but approve all the money in
Yeah.
one.
Well,
I don't know if they're willing to do that or if it's too confusing.
Yeah, the motions would be made after our presentation, before our presentation?
My hope is that everything is done on Tuesday night after your
Sure.
presentation and
Okay,
after the
after.
conclusion of the public hearing, so that we can,
So what I was thinking is maybe if we move that $2,597,000 to just under the 1,709, and just said total FY21 capital projects to be approved by town council or something.
Yeah, and then move
So
the-
that it's clear that that's the amount in
Right.
total that needs to be approved.
that sounds reasonable.
All right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think in the past, there were always separate issues
Yes,
that we dealt with on motions. It was the budget, general fund budget, capital projects, and then revolving fund and enterprise. I think
well,
we're
we can
combined.
still do it that way. I mean, I have the templates for those, so it's
Yeah.
not really an inconvenience, whatever you think
Yeah,
I
works
think for
best.
clarity's sake, it would be, what Jim
All
has
right.
suggested would be good, and then just move all the enterprise funds in together.
I think it just it potentially makes it easier if there's challenges or questions to specific pieces of it.
Mhm.
Then we don't have to redo the whole budget, it's just that section of the budget that.
Sure.
So yeah, we can subtotal it any way you want, Mary. I didn't know with the town council, we were taking votes, like sewer enterprise fund, $1,030,858, water enterprise fund, 504,908, or should those all be subtotaled somewhere so that the town
Well,
council just
the way the
says
motion
that
is
total?
drafted, they are set out in the same motion and then totaled. So, that was the way it was done last year.
That way.
She just said
All
that.
three of those enterprise funds.
Yeah.
Yes, and the ambulance tagged on at the end.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I don't have that one with me because I scribbled all over it yesterday afternoon and it's being redrawn.
So would you want a subtotal for all the enterprise fund and ambulance?
Well, I think I have it based on our
Well, I'm just wondering
discussion.
whether I should add it here too, so
Sure.
that it's a number. And you're doing all the enterprise funds and you're adding the ambulance.
Yes.
Okay.
But I had segregated out the, as you did with
Yeah.
your footnote, the amounts from the sewer for that $58,000 truck and the amount for
Oh,
water.
okay,
So I had said, in the motion it reads, to be paid from the sewer, from the sewer vehicle reserve fund, 58, whatever. And then to be bonded and paid the balance of that $1,030,000 that's in there. And the same on water. And then the whole total is at the bottom of the motion.
so what I may do is put a subtotal of the enterprise ones too. It does have, I think, the titling of coming from anywhere you choose, in terms of the combination.
Yeah. Well, I spoke with the town clerk yesterday
Yeah.
too, and after this meeting, and depending on what discussion occurred here, I was going to give all the motions to her
Yeah.
today to be forwarded to the council so that at least they'd have them 3 or 4 days in
Yeah.
advance so that they don't have to,
Right.
read them for the first time on Tuesday
Yeah,
night.
and this is just,
And that would be
this is
helpful.
just showing the numbers and the recommendation. Your articles would be the
Yeah,
piece
Would
that
it be
becomes
helpful?
official.
I think it would be, but
Yeah.
it's I would like to give the council a copy of this in advance also.
Certainly.
Just because, we have the benefit of 3 or 4 of you
Right.
here week to week, but for those who weren't able to,
Sure.
or part of the committee, I think it might make the,
Process.
aid their comprehension
Sure.
Yes.
and understanding of what we're talking about if they had it for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I think once Jim makes the changes that he wants, he can send you the file. Can it be?
Yeah, I'll run it by you, Chris, the changes on this capital
Yeah.
one, just to make sure they make sense to you,
Okay, Okay.
screen it for me.
yeah.
And then we can send it along. Sure, since we are ready to be able to do it, there's no sense in not letting people see it ahead of time.
Right, right,
And then the final one was
information.
the mill rate and projection and reserves balance analysis. Diane caught me in brought to my attention. I kind of shuffled a few of the columns and removed one, and I failed to change my formulas, I think, so that the Financial Oversight Committee's recommendation versus the FY20 actual in terms of dollar difference and percent difference is zeros. So I need to just change those. That should be 44,785,394 in terms of the increase in valuation, and a 2.2% increase in valuation from FY20 to what's projected for FY21. And again, we're using our recommendation, so it is 56,000 less in terms of the uses budget, and that means our our need to raise money is 56,000 less, so our projected mill rate is slightly lower, so it's 47 cents, a 2.2% increase. The next part, I did correct that calculation. It looks a lot better at 6.6% in terms
Yes.
of reserves versus what I had. My only question, I guess, is I know there was discussion of perhaps more than usual turnbacks to the stabilization fund at the end of the year. Do we have any idea what that is? I'm just wondering whether there's a new or a better updated stabilization fund balance, or does it take a while for those things to actually be analyzed and then transferred
Yeah,
into
they
the
haven't occurred yet,
stabilization fund?
so that balance is the same.
Okay.
That's another issue that is out there looming, but we think
Yeah.
it'll have a favorable result, but
Well,
haven't gotten to it yet.
yeah, since you're on a 1/12 budget, that kind of slows the process down, I think, for the turnbacks and the calculation of that until you're into an actual budget. Then you'd have a clearer picture of what the turnbacks are. Am I correct, Steve?
We're working on the analysis of it now and to get some for FY20 entered in to see what we're looking at.
Very
And
good.
hopefully it'll be soon.
Yeah. Well, as we said, we keep saying this is an interim budget. It's provisional, so it's subject to change.
Amen. So I'll make that correction on the mill rate projection comparison, or the valuation comparison, and that basically is pretty much the format we used last year.
You know, Chris, I don't know if you saw the paper this morning, but the town of Palmer passed their budget this week, or maybe last week. It was in the newspaper this morning, and they used $677,000 of their stabilization fund in their operating budget to bring
Really?
it to balance. So the good news for East Long Meadow is we have not invaded that. I mean, now we're not
No.
making a contribution as we
Right.
would like to,
Right.
but I think that's very positive.
Yeah.
I mean, that community has around 13,000 people living in it, and same form of government. They have a town manager and a
Right.
council and separate independent school systems. So, and I noted South Hadley too used 300,000 of their free cash to balance their operating budget a week or two ago. So, I guess we're a little bit ahead of the curve. I hope we stay there.
I do
I know when we started our process, there was some, I know we raised the issue of, well, geez, this may be a year we may need to use the stabilization fund to do that. Hopefully, the projections for the local receipts, et cetera, will bear out, and the projection for the state aid will bear out.
Well, you know, I feel that we approach this in a common sense approach. You don't go into savings unless you absolutely have to, and you provide for what's needed, not necessarily for what's wanted.
And in addition, I think our approach is a very sound one in that this could be a 2-year process from what we're hearing. And to expend our savings in the first year and not have anything for the second year when things may turn worse or still are unknown. I'd rather save the penny now.
Yeah. I think everyone's done
Yeah.
yeoman's work on this, especially Mary
Yeah.
and now Steve. And we've tried to lend a hand when we could. And hopefully, you know, the council will definitely make the decision. So, and that being said, if there's no further discussion, is there anything on old business? I have something on old business. I want to particularly thank Kathy Hill. She volunteered and has served, taking our minutes and doing them very well and making sure they get turned over to the clerk's office. So Kathy, thank you
You're very welcome.
Very
for all your help.
This one will be a little sketchy. I realize already that I'm gonna have to watch the video and type it at the same time.
Anything under new business? If not, it's on to Tuesday evening with our presentation. Jim and I will share that as we did last year. And I hope everybody will be, I'm sure you'll be in attendance.
We're sleeping over now.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
can I
you.
hear a
Thank
motion
you,
to?
Chris.
Thank you and Jim.
Oh,
Yes,
Yes,
as
always,
always.
definitely. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on adjourning? If hearing none, everyone say aye.
Aye.
Aye.